Alex had never been the type to wear his heart on his sleeve. He was quiet, thoughtful, and often lost in his own thoughts, particularly when it came to Professor Lily. From the first moment he set foot in her classroom, something inside him stirred, a flutter in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name but knew was special. Professor Lily was everything he had ever admired in a person: poised, intelligent, and graceful. Her smile, even in the midst of a difficult lecture, seemed to light up the entire room. Her voice, soft yet commanding, was the kind that made everything seem clearer, even when the material itself felt incomprehensible. But it wasn't just her beauty or her brilliance that captivated him. It was the way she made him feel. For someone who had always struggled to connect with others, Professor Lily had a way of seeing him. She didn't just speak to the class. She spoke to each individual, making everyone feel like they mattered. And when she looked at him, when her eyes locked onto his for just a moment, Alex felt something he had never felt before. The overwhelming sensation that, in that brief exchange, the world had narrowed to just the two of them. Every time he entered her classroom, Alex's heart pounded in his chest. His mind raced, his hands would grow clammy, and he would desperately try to keep his focus on the lecture, to ignore the heat that rose in his cheeks every time she called on him. He couldn't explain why it happened, why the words, "I think I understand," seemed to get caught in his throat whenever she addressed him. It was as if her mere presence triggered something deep inside him, a longing, a desire, a feeling that he couldn't quite place, but couldn't ignore. As the weeks went by, his admiration grew into something deeper, more dangerous. He found himself staying after class, asking questions not because he needed to know the answers, but because it gave him an excuse to be near her, to bask in the warmth of her attention. He would linger by the door, pretending to check his notes or adjust his bag, just so he could steal a moment of her time. Sometimes they would chat about the lesson, and other times it would be about something more mundane, a book she was reading, a movie she had watched. Each conversation felt like a gift, each moment of shared words an opportunity he didn't want to end. But despite his growing feelings, Alex was painfully aware of the boundaries. She was his professor, and he was her student. He understood the rules, the unspoken etiquette that kept students at a distance from their instructors. He had heard the stories, the rumors about what had happened to other students who had crossed the line, who had let their emotions take control. Those who had gotten too close to their professors often found themselves ostracized, their reputations tarnished, their futures uncertain. And yet, with every passing day, his emotions became harder to contain. It was as if his heart had a will of its own, defying the logic and the fear that his mind tried to impose on it. Then, one afternoon, after class had ended, Alex found himself standing outside her office. The hallways were quiet, the building empty save for a few scattered students. His feet moved of their own accord, carrying him toward her door. His heart raced, his palms grew clammy. He had to tell her. He couldn't keep these feelings bottled up anymore. The thought of losing her, of letting her walk out of his life without ever knowing the truth, was unbearable. He knocked gently on her office door, the sound echoing in the silent hallway. A moment later, Professor Lily's voice called out from inside. "Come in!" Alex hesitated for just a second, then turned the handle. He stepped inside, and there she was, sitting at her desk, her eyes still focused on the papers before her. For a moment, he just watched her, taking in the way the soft light from the window played off her features, the way her hair fell just so, framing her face. The sight of her, in this quiet, intimate space, made his heart ache. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Alex," she said, her voice warm, inviting. "What's on your mind?" He swallowed hard. His mouth was dry, his tongue heavy, but he couldn't back out now. He had to say something, anything, to make her understand, to make her see him the way he saw her. I've been meaning to tell you something," he began, his voice shaking. He could feel the words trembling on his lips, as if they were too fragile, too important to speak. "I've had these feelings for a while now, and She raised a hand, gently interrupting him. Her expression shifted, and Alex immediately felt a sense of unease settle in his stomach. She didn't seem surprised, but rather, there was a sadness in her eyes that he couldn't understand. She put down the pen she had been holding and leaned back in her chair, her gaze soft yet firm. "Alex," she said, her tone gentle but resolute, "I care about you." "I do. You're an incredible student, and I respect you so much. But what you're feeling—" She paused, collecting her thoughts before continuing. "This can't happen. It's not right." Alex's chest constricted. His mind went numb as the words hit him like a wave, washing away all the courage he had mustered. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He was desperate for an explanation, for something that would make sense of the pain that was now growing in his chest. Her eyes flickered with something Alex couldn't quite place. It wasn't indifference. It was something far more painful. "Alex, I have to keep things professional. I'm your professor. I can't cross that line. I wish things were different, but they're not." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Alex wanted to say something, anything, to convince her that this was real, that his feelings weren't just a fleeting crush. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he stood there in silence, feeling a lump form in his throat. He wanted to scream, to shout at the unfairness of it all. But all that came out was a hollow, aching silence. She stood up then, her eyes softening with regret. "Alex, I'm sorry. I hope you understand. You're a bright, talented young man, and you deserve someone who can give you everything you want. But that's not me. Not now. Not ever." Her words stung, cutting deeper than anything he had ever felt before. The crushing weight of rejection settled in his chest, suffocating him. He nodded, though it felt like his body was moving without his permission, a mechanical response to a situation he had no control over. "I understand," he managed to say, his voice barely audible. He turned to leave, but as he reached the door, he felt her gaze on him once more. He wanted to look back, to see if there was any trace of the affection he had imagined, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he walked out of her office, his heart shattered, his soul heavy with the knowledge that the woman he loved would never be his. Days passed, but Alex's heart remained tethered to Professor Lily, like a ship stranded in a stormy sea, unable to find its way back to shore. He tried to bury his feelings beneath the weight of assignments and lectures, but they always resurfaced, like the tide rising higher each time he thought he could outrun it. Every time he walked through the campus, every time he saw her in the hallway, it felt as though the earth shifted beneath his feet, a constant reminder of the love that could never be. His friends noticed the change in him. He was quieter, more withdrawn, his once easy smile replaced with a distant, empty gaze. They asked him about it, but he always shrugged them off, pretending that everything was fine. How could he explain what he was feeling? How could he put into words the ache in his chest, the gnawing emptiness that consumed him every time he saw her, but couldn't be near her? Alex had tried with every ounce of his being to convince himself that he would move on. But the truth was, every little thing about Professor Lily haunted him. The way she walked, the way she spoke, the way her eyes sparkled when she shared something she was passionate about. All of it was embedded in his mind like a series of snapshots that played on a constant loop. He found himself looking at her social media profiles, every post a painful reminder of the life she had outside of class, her friends, her hobbies, her life that was entirely separate from his own. One afternoon, as he sat in the library, Alex overheard a conversation between a group of students, their voices carrying over the hush of the quiet room. They were talking about Professor Lily, their words laced with admiration and awe. They spoke about how perfect she was, how kind, how beautiful. But the words that stuck with Alex were the ones that came at the end of the conversation, when one of the students casually mentioned that Professor Lily had never been married, that she had always kept to herself, dedicating her life to her work. In that moment, Alex felt a sharp pang of both hope and despair. Was there a chance? Was it possible that she, too, felt the same way? Or was she simply trapped in the same cage of professional boundaries, her own heart locked away, just as his was? He didn't know, and the not knowing gnawed at him like a constant ache. But he couldn't allow himself to believe in such fantasies. The truth was simple. She had rejected him, and he had to respect that. But respecting that was the hardest thing he had ever had to do. Each day, he found himself suppressing his feelings more and more, burying them beneath layers of self-doubt, fear, and shame. Every time he saw her, every time they exchanged pleasantries in class, it felt like a small piece of his soul was being chipped away. But what could he do? What other choice did he have? What Alex didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that Professor Lily was struggling with the same pain. She was fighting the same internal battle, the same desperate longing that he had, but hers was much more complicated. She had always prided herself on being a professional, on maintaining the boundaries between herself and her students. She had taught countless classes, had mentored countless students, but Alex was different. From the moment he entered her class, she could see the intelligence in his eyes, the earnestness in his efforts. And over time, she began to notice the way he looked at her, always with a little too much intensity, a little too much hope. She had seen it before, in the eyes of other students who had admired her from a distance, but this was different. It wasn't just admiration, it was something deeper, something more painful. She had known from the beginning that Alex had feelings for her. It was impossible not to notice, and at first, she had tried to brush it off, to convince herself that it was nothing more than a fleeting crush, something that would pass with time. But as the semester went on, as their interactions deepened and their conversations became more frequent, she began to realize that her feelings for him were not as simple as she had hoped. She too found herself drawn to him. She couldn't help it. His kindness, his intelligence, his vulnerability, all of it spoke to her in a way that no one else had. She found herself thinking about him when she was alone, wondering what he was doing, wondering if he was okay. She found herself wishing that she could let go of the boundaries that had defined her professional life for so long, wishing that she could simply be with him, without fear, without hesitation. But she couldn't. She knew the consequences. She had seen what happened to other professors who had crossed that line. She had witnessed the scandal, the whispers, the ruined careers. And as much as her heart ached, as much as she wanted to be with Alex, she knew that the price would be too high. So she buried her feelings. She kept her distance, both physically and emotionally, even though it tore her apart every time she saw him. She tried to act as though nothing was wrong, as though everything was perfectly normal. But the truth was, she was just as broken as Alex was. She was carrying a weight that no one else could understand, a burden that she couldn't share with anyone. She was sacrificing her own happiness, her own desires, for the sake of maintaining the professional distance that was expected of her. And yet, every time she saw Alex, every time their eyes met, she couldn't help but feel the pull of something deeper, something more profound. She loved him more than she had ever loved anyone before, but she could never have him. It was a love she would have to let go of, for his sake, for her sake, for the sake of the rules that governed her life. It was late one evening when the weight of it all became too much for her to bear. She sat alone in her office, the campus quiet around her, the soft hum of the air conditioning the only sound in the room. She thought about Alex, about how he must have felt when she rejected him. She thought about how he had looked at her with so much hope in his eyes, and how she had crushed that hope with her words. The guilt flooded her chest, suffocating her, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself cry. "I'm sorry, Alex," she whispered to the empty room, her voice trembling. "I love you too. I always have." But it was too late. The moment had passed. The boundaries had been set. And all they had left was silence, silent love, silent sacrifice, silent longing that would never be acknowledged. She knew that she could never have him, just as he could never have her. And so, they both lived in the quiet agony of a love that was never meant to be, both silently sacrificing their happiness for the sake of duty and propriety. And in that silence, they would both remain, forever haunted by a love they could never share. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more touching tales like this. Your support means the world to us and helps us create more stories that warm the heart. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching and being part of our story family.